about that feed. Thumbs up, that's good. So yeah, if somebody gives me a cue when that live stream is going, we will kick on. Is that, oh, there we go. Hello and welcome to an In the Money Media special event. This is our Derby Dozen show. We are live at the Galt House Escape Room. I'm kidding. We are live at the Galt House, a phenomenal hotel in downtown Louisville. We are right in the middle of things. I've stayed here for a Breeders' Cup. This is my first Derby here. The atmosphere is electric. We have an amazing panel to go over the 12 key questions for this year's Kentucky Derby, plus a whole lot more. I now introduce your host for the evening. She has been imported all the way from England. She's my colleague at Sky Sports Racing. She is Vanessa Ryle.
Hello, thanks. Yeah, great. Love the round of applause. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I made this joke yesterday, but I still find it very amusing that this is literally the most American weekend of the American year when it comes in horse racing, and they've shipped in a Brit who's never done a Kentucky Derby before, and the whole thing is incredibly chaotic in my mind, and I don't know what's going on half the time. Absolutely loving it. Hospitality here. You guys know how to look after me, so thank you very much to everyone. Kentucky Derby is nearly upon us. Obviously, Oaks Day tomorrow, Derby on Saturday. You've already touched upon it, Peter. It feels like tensions are pretty high. Tensions are building. Obviously, it's been not an undramatic news week. Maggie, I'm going to come to you first. You've been on the ground all week at Churchill, I presume.
Yeah.
What's the vibe like? Give us some on-the-ground intel for how things are up there.
Well, so with regards to the Derby and Oaks horses, obviously there's been some drama today. You kind of felt that Practical Move was going to come out possibly because he never got into a gallop since he got on the grounds from California. They kind of would bring him out and he'd jog and then he'd disappear and you're like, whoa, is he going to gallop by us at some point? So you kind of knew that something was odd and up with him. And then unfortunately with the deaths that we saw at the racetrack with Saffie Joseph's horse, I think Churchill had to take immediate action. And I think Saffie was on board with it too, to scratch all of his horses from this weekend, including Lord Miles. So yeah, it's been a little bit of damage control. And hopefully we see our equine athletes, as always, safe. And
of course, yeah. What about some positives? You know, who's feeling the good vibes? You know, there must be a good vibe up there as well.
Absolutely. The good vibes I've gotten are from, I love the story behind Two Phils. He's kind of like an easy horse and team to root for. These people where he was a failed sales effort.
Yeah.
And what a homebred as well, and a horse, because he didn't work well at the sales on the poly, going the eighth of a mile, and then he's just gotten better and better and better. And two, you're having a jockey that got his start at Great Lakes Downs in Michigan. I mean, that doesn't even exist anymore. And he's worked his way up through the ranks from, those tracks in the Midwest and Oaklawn where he really broke out, and then down at the fairgrounds in Jareth Loveberry, riding his first Derby ever. So that's kind of the feel-good story, Vanessa, I feel like, of this Derby, and certainly human and horse connections that you can get behind.
Lovely, like that a lot. JK, you've been on the ground as well. How's the week gone for you so far?
So far, so good. It's funny, like on Wednesday and Thursday of Derby week, it's always kind of like keep the powder dry, but still try to pick up some extra money so that you can have some more to fire away on the big day. So did okay today, so that's good. All that's going in the right direction. And looks like the weather is going to be pretty good. The last I saw was possibly rain like right after the Oaks tomorrow. That stops at like 3 in the morning, which should see us fast and firm on Saturday. So far, so good.
Okay, and Peter, quick check-in with you. Obviously, you arrived in Louisville today with me, a bit earlier than me, but you're getting settled in, ready for the action tomorrow.
I'm pumped, and I really wasn't prepared for how Derby crazy the whole town is. You know, everywhere you went.
Look, neither was I. Trust me. Arrived in, and I was like, "This is madness. What is going on?" Like, you can arrive into Liverpool for the Aintree Grand National, which is our biggest day in terms of kind of getting out to a wider racing audience than just horse racing fans. And, you know, you'd walk around Liverpool, you wouldn't know that it was the Grand National necessarily. Whereas here, you can't miss it.
Unavoidable. And it was great just having every random person I met bring up horse racing to me. That doesn't happen. You know, I'm usually trying to shoehorn it in to conversation. Here it was completely natural and normal. So I really like the whole party vibe and, you know, the vibe that's taken over the hotel here at the Galt House. It's not just here, it's throughout the whole city. And that's pretty special.
Absolutely, right. The sort of premise of tonight is we've got 12 questions. And we're going to, as you can probably tell, have just a pretty casual chat. We're going to start with the question, bounce around a bit. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. So we will kick straight off, shall we?
Let's do it.
First question. Are these from podcast listeners, are they?
Yeah, these are from our In the Money podcast plus listeners. It's sort of like a Substack. It is a Substack / Patreon model. So, you know, we have tons of content that's free, but then other people who want to support the channel and the stuff we do, you pay a little extra month, you get some extra shows and some extra little privileges, whatever you want to call them, here and there. And so they sent in the questions. Tyler Wisman, In the Money Plus editor, and I curated, and we have these ones to get the conversation rolling. And then, you know, everybody feel free to go on whatever tangents as we go on. No need to be, you know, too strict.
Let's crack straight on. Carl H. has asked the following, everyone. Last year's winner was such a long shot. Lots of people will be betting on long shots just for fun, as well as the chance of hitting big. This will bring some odds down a bit. What do you think will end up being the longest shot in the Kentucky Derby? JK, I'm going to throw that at you. Who's going to be the longest shot?
Honestly, I think it should be Raise Cane. I think it might be Raise Cane. But I got to be honest with you, as popular as their chicken strips are, I think that some people might bet that horse just because of the name. I know that sounds stupid. But I really do think that the horse might just be bet because of the name. So
it sounds stupid. That's all we ever do over in England in the Grand National is pick horses because of names. So that's
how I learned to read. I mean, just reading the program and picking names I like. So
there you go. Okay.
So you know, look, without being too cheeky, I do think Race Cane, but I am also serious that. I remember like my boy Jack, because everyone knows someone named Jack. That horse got bet completely off the board. Patch, Pants on Fire got overbet. I think Race Cane might be kind of a cute name, so we'll see. But I think that on paper, that feels like one of the longest shots.
What about the AEs that now draw in, as we saw with Rich Strike, they get forgotten a lot of times.
Okay.
So it feels... I think you're right. I think he deserves to be the longest shot in Raise Cane, but I feel like Cyclone Mischief could get a little forgotten, and two, he also doesn't feel quite good enough either.
Okay, what about you, Peter? Who's the longest shot?
I like the AE shout, and I'll be cheeky and I'll say King Russell. Should he draw in?
Exactly.
Unless...
He should be.
I could also see a situation where if it becomes a narrative, oh, this horse drew in at the 11th hour just like Rich Strike, that enough people in the public say, you know what, well, that happened last year, why not? I'm going to bet this, thinking it's going to be a 60-1 shot or higher that snuck in the field. Maybe people will be looking for lightning to strike twice, though I do think that might be the case of, you know, you find a wallet on the street on Saturday, and then you go back on Sunday looking to find another wallet there.
Yeah.
Probably not going to happen.
Doesn't happen quite the same, does it? Before we move on from this question, Maggie, I'm going to throw this question your way. It's a bit of a supplementary question. Of the horses at a much bigger price, sort of away from the horses we're going to talk about that are likely winners, who do you think is too big a price or will go off too big a price, who might run a better race than expected? I'm not asking for like necessarily a place, but just the horse who might surprise people in how he runs, from what you've seen on the ground.
Ooh, I would say Disarm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
He's just made such a great impression physically. He might just be slow. He might just have that kind of grinding, plodding type of style to him. But, and maybe this is me reading into human connections a little bit too much.
I love doing that. I love doing that. Don't you worry.
Steve Asmussen, he can be hit or miss, and that's putting it lightly when you go to talk to him. He has never been more pleasant this week and more loquacious and more open than I've ever seen him. So maybe he's just feeling like, geez, man, I've gotten here so many times. I'm the winningest trainer of everything, basically, and I still haven't gotten the Derby win. I'm just gonna, let it ride. I'm just gonna enjoy myself.
Pressure's off kind of thing with a horse like him.
Exactly. And so I listened to an interview on the radio with him, and he said, he had a great quote. It's something I believe in too. The Kentucky Derby isn't really a race, it's an event. And so many things can happen. And he said that it often feels like a more divine intervention pure creates a winner. And so maybe it is. His time.
Love that. Okay, interesting. Let's move on to question 2, guys. Ken B has asked, I've heard several different horses mentioned as the possible pace setter in this year's Derby. Who do you expect to be on the lead at the half-mile pole, JK?
I think Verifying. I mean, I don't see why Tyler Gaffalione and Brad Cox are going to be like, hey, let's take back and eat a bunch of dirt. I just feel like they'll send away from there, try to get their position. The horse is fast, the pace that he set in the Bluegrass, and I think that was probably the best prep we saw in the United States. So I think Verifying. And Brad Cox also as a trainer, he doesn't usually, he's like kind of like Bob Baffert as well, and even Todd to a certain extent, where they don't rate their speed horses. Like, that's just never an option for how you try to handle a situation. Ask Knicks Go, right? Knicks Go was an average horse until Brad Cox just started letting him roll. I think Verifying will find the front end from the inside post.
Okay, does anyone have any different view for that answer, that question?
I think the post definitely forces the hand and makes that the most likely answer. Half-mile pole, we're talking about half-mile from the finish. It is possible at that point, if there's enough of a scrum, that by that point you could see a change in leader. And one horse I do expect to be stalking and pouncing right around that time is Derma Sotogake from the 17. But I like that idea of Verifying, being certainly, I don't know about a half mile from the race, but a half mile into the race, unless something goes wrong, I think it will be Verifying.
Okay.
I don't disagree with either of those answers, but there's a reason to believe that Reincarnate will be forward as well here, and possibly right there at the half mile pole, because 2 back in the Rebel, he didn't break, and I think it was a matter of him being on a wet track for the first time and that ground just completely breaking away from him and then getting slap kicked in his face, and he was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing.
Victim of circumstance.
Right.
Yeah.
But every other race, he has been prominent. He has been forward. And John Velasquez is not a rider to, concede the lead or concede a forward position to anybody else. He has won so many races in my lifetime of watching him, because he goes and other riders just are like, okay, Johnny's going, I'm just going to take back and let him go. And it usually plays in Johnny's favor.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on to question 3. JB has asked, who is the wise guy horse in this year's Kentucky Derby field? I have no idea what this term means.
Right, can we define it?
I'm asking a question I literally don't understand.
Can you two define wise guy? Because I've heard now. So Andy Serling would say something.
What does wise guy mean?
So wise guy is one of these great terms. It's what's known as an antagonym, right? Because it means what it means, and it means its opposite at the same time. So,
great definition.
Yeah, in one sense, the wise guy horse.
I'm more confused than I was when I was
rightfully so, Vanessa.
Let me explain. So I think in its truest sense, when somebody talks about a wise guy horse, they're talking about a horse that is sort of a clever alternative to the obvious. I think in the initial way that it was used, it's a smart guy's or gal's horse to use that you think is good and going to run well. But I feel like in its overuse over time, it almost becomes the horse that's too clever by half, who a lot of people will gravitate towards, but really then ends up taking like too much money and is actually a bad bet. So you can interpret it really either way.
Okay, well, can we use it in its original sense?
Sure.
Let's use it in its original sense, seeing as the secondary sense has confused me a little bit. So who is the wise guy horse in this year's Kentucky Derby field? Let's start with you, Peter. We'll work our way this way, please.
I think it's Skinner. I think this is a horse that I've heard a lot of very sharp players talk about their interest in him. I think that he's also very interesting because of the hands he's in. Trainer John Sheriffs, who people will remember from Zenyatta, he is known as a very, very patient horseman, very old school, doesn't let them do too much too soon. The exact kind of guy who I think you can make a pretty safe assumption is going to have his charges ready to peak on the biggest day. This is a horse that makes a lot of sense to me. It should be a very big price, but I could absolutely see hitting the board and being that wise guy horse in the traditional sense of it.
Okay, do you have anything else to add into the mix, Maggie?
I mean, the wise guy term still confuses me to this day. But I would not disagree with Skinner. I feel like Mage could take that place. I feel like Confidence Game could be that horse too. That's a terrible answer, but
Wise guy horse. But I think you're right in the sense that this field, you can make, and to use it in that sense, you can make wise guy cases for a lot of the horses because you have this horse who is a big favorite in the markets, the international markets leading up to this, who does not, in every sense that a typical horse player looks at, like numbers-wise, does not tower over the field. He does in terms of his resume. He doesn't in terms of his numbers. And that brings in some really interesting ideas of horses that might be 20 to 1 or higher.
Okay, love it. What about you? Who's your wise guy horse?
Yeah, I mean, I can't get my brain around. I think a wise guy horse is like kind of in a negative, like the kind of silly horse that like the person who's trying to get really too cute and trying to like be extra creative tries to come up with.
I feel like that's the current definition.
That's the current definition, and that's my brain can only see that one. So
yeah.
Okay,
I'm going to go with
use that one.
And I don't like Confidence Game, and I've heard a lot of people talk about the horse. But when you take a 70-day break between the Derby and your prep, and you're going to maybe run in this race, but then you decided to not run in that race because you're going to maybe run in this race, and then you're going to train in that race, and then you're going to work a mile, but then you're going to not. I don't need you.
Okay, not into that then. Let's move on to question 4. Why does everyone seem to hate the inside draws for Verifying and Tap It Trice? Why does everyone hate it, Maggie?
I think I don't know why. I don't know why they hate it. I can see it a little bit with Tap It Trice because I think it was on display in the Bluegrass win. We actually saw him break kind of well, relatively speaking, for what he typically does. And Louis Saez immediately gets him off the inside and chooses to go 4 or 5 wide down the backstretch because he is a horse that doesn't really love running through the kickback.
Okay.
So I see it being a negative for him. I don't see it being a negative for Verifying. If you have a horse that has, early prominent speed, don't you want to save ground? I mean, I don't take it as a negative for Verifying. I can see where it might be a problem for Tap It Trice.
Do you have any problem with the inside draw?
Yeah, I mean, if Verifying drew the 18, I would pick him. The problem is, I think, for Tap It Trice first, I completely agree with everything that Maggie said. I don't think the horse really likes kickback, and he's a grinder. The worst thing that can happen to a grinder is getting stopped or getting in behind a horse and then not having to grind and having to wait to kick through a hole. I just don't know if he's that type of animal. Now, I'm still going to ultimately, possibly, I'm not going to give it away yet, pick Tap It Trice because I think that there's a world in which he works out a trip where he ends up in the clear when they kind of clear out in front of him, and then he can maybe end up in that spot. With Verifying, my biggest issue is when you're an inside speed horse, you have one option, which is to go. And you have, 6 to 7 horses outside of you that could put pressure around you all the way around there. That's my only issue. If you're drawn outside, you've got 19 different options. You can maybe go, you can sit, you can go, you can stay, and you're in the clear, and you're not getting pressure. So I get it. Yes, for Verifying, he could save ground, and that could work out well for him. But it only gives him one way to win. There's one way that Verifying can win from the inside. There's a lot of different ways if he was drawn towards the outside.
Okay. Anything to add, Peter, before we move on?
Nothing on Tap It Trice. I think the team crushed that one. I'll just add with Verifying, there's just no margin for error in the 20-horse field. In a 10-horse field, you might pick the 2 for him. In a 20-horse field, if he breaks a half step slow, it's over. If he gets, jostled or bumped with the cavalry charge coming over to the first turn, that's going to be very hard for him to then prove best of speed and hold off the closers. So it could work out, absolutely, in Maggie's scenario, but I just feel like if he was outside, he could break half a step slow, still get position, still have a chance to work out a trip. Whereas, I don't like him as much down there the way that I see the race unfolding in my head.
Okay, lovely. Let's move on. Question 5. Curtis W. has asked, who is the best horse to key in the Tri and the Superfecta? You can have this one.
Honestly, I think Forte. I understand that he's the favorite, but you can make a lot of money still keying one horse. I don't care if they're 6-5 or if they're 20-1. People think, I want to key a 20-1 shot. You don't have to key a 20-1 shot. You should key the horse that you feel is the most likely to be in those spots. And I think that if Forte gets a clean trip, he will hit the board. He might not win because his numbers are a little bit light, but he's shown so much class that to me, he's going to be running on at the end. It just might not be fast enough.
Okay, fair enough. Peter, do you have an answer for the question?
I think Jonathan has the right answer. I mean, Forte is the yardstick by which the generation should be measured at this point. And I don't see him I guess I can conjure some scenarios where he runs a dud, but I think anything resembling his representative race puts him in the top 4, even with his lack of number advantage. I will throw out a horse going back to a previous question too about something at a silly price that might be able to get involved. And this is also a little bit of a shout out to our In the Money Plus editor, Tyler Wisman, who loves this horse. The idea of Sun Thunder for 3rd or 4th, I don't think he can finish higher than that. But this is a horse who could be in that conversation for longest shot on the board.
Yeah. And
I do think he'll be running along late. I see a scenario where he could pass some tired horses and be like what we would call a bottom-up key in a bet like the Tri or the Super. So I'll just throw that one out there as well.
Okay, and anything to add, Maggie, before we move on?
That is not my forte.
That is absolutely fine. As an FYI, this whole gig is not my forte, but I'm faking it until I make it because that's what they keep telling me to do back in England. So we will roll on. Chris I has asked, what are the best races to get narrow in the pick 5 that end with the Derby? JK, you can start with that.
Definitely Cody's Wish.
Yes.
Definitely is Cody's Wish. And I'll say this, when you look at that race, which is the Churchill Downs Stakes, you'll look at a bunch of horses in there that a lot of them have run big races, but they've run big races on Lasix. You look at Cody's Wish, his last 4 races have been monstrous without Lasix. He'll show up. There's no reason Godolphin would bring him back to run him in a prep race here. He could go on and be a stallion. I think he'll be ready to run, and I think he'll be tough to beat.
Plus,
Maggie,
I gotta give a little personal shout out to my uncle who gallops Cody's Wish. So.
Oh,
nice.
Love it.
Yeah. So
and how happy are they with him then?
Enormously.
Great.
So there's just nobody that can even sniff him in here. I think.
No, and there's the one horse I think that could beat him. I don't think is gonna run.
It's good. No, White Bar is scratched. He's
Okay.
out. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I saw it the same way as far as singling. I do like Santine in the oh my gosh,
Woodford
the race.
Reserve.
Thank
Turf
you,
Classic.
Turf Classic. Leading up to it, I think he has a major shot, but it's not a. I don't think that's necessarily a race you single in.
Okay. Let's move on then to, are we on number 7? Rob N has asked, what is the best bet you feel most confident in on either undercard to increase your bankroll for the days? I think I know your answer to be Cody's Wish.
Well, I think Cody's Wish in terms of the pick 5. I think tomorrow Caravel should be extremely hard to beat. I don't think Money's Gold can lose in any situation. In the 8 bells, I think she'll be extremely tough. You can maybe play a double with Money's Gold into Caravel. I don't know. It might get kind of busted up a little bit. You can also start the pick 5 singling those 2 horses. That's what I'll be doing. And then the first race on Saturday, if the real Extra Anejo shows up, the one that we saw as a 2-year-old at Keeneland, that horse is an absolute freak. So
Wow.
I would imagine
All right.
that Steve wouldn't run him on Derby Day to run 3rd.
Wow, okay, big shout. First race on Saturday. Love that. What about you on the undercard, Peter?
How about we, this is another one. Check the double probables to make sure you're not going to be betting to lose money here. But from race 4 to race 5 on Saturday, I feel like you could probably do pretty well with just a favorite cold double, Goodnight Olive to Spenderella if you want to build a little bit of money for the later races on Saturday. you might want to do one backup line with Speak of the Devil in that 5th race as well. But yeah, two with 5 and a smaller 2 with 2 in the double on Saturday races 4 and 5. Feel pretty confident that those are favorites that are going to deliver. You know, these big days, it's tempting to try to find long shots, big fields. There's a lot of money in the pool, a lot going on. But there are a lot of horses that are just going to be, a lot of great horses like a Goodnight Olive, like a Spenderella. They're going to be laid out. They're not coming here. Yes, they are going to have campaigns and run through the year, but you know, the hands they're in, they're not coming here like JK said about Extra and Yayo. They're not coming here to run third. I think if you can find some of these shorter prices to rely on in some of these undercard races, it can give you a chance to maybe take a little bit of a shot later on down the line.
Maggie's got a thumb up like she agrees.
No, I like that line of the horses that are coming here because their connections believe they're going to win. And I think a horse that kind of fits that billing is Big Invasion in the turf sprint. He was probable to the Elusive Quality, which is home up in New York this weekend too. And Christophe Clement sent him down a week ago knowing that he was going to run here. And furthermore, he loves the 5.5 distance versus, well, he's been successful at it going 7. The 5.5 just really feels like his kind of niche. And 2, he's just a win machine. And you don't necessarily find that with turf sprinters because they can be such chaotic races.
Yeah, so much can happen that you just one misstep and you haven't
exactly.
won it.
It's over, in the blink of an eye. Yeah, so he's just so consistent. I feel like that's such a rare quality for a turf sprinter. I think it's a special quality too.
And he's a closer, which the fact that he keeps winning and he's a closer is shocking to me.
You hate him.
No, I love him. I
love it. He's anti
No, I love
theory.
him, and that's weird because I hate closing turf
Exactly.
sprinters.
That's what I mean. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to question 8 then. We are back to Derby chat only here. What kind of trip do you see Derma Sotogake getting from the 17? With so much pace inside, will he be able to get position or will he have to go too wide? And the person who's asked that is PJP. Thank you very much for your question. Will he have to go too wide, Peter?
I think it'll be all right. Churchill Downs, most of the time, is the kind of track where, and I don't know how the maintenance crew manages this, but you can be 3 wide. It's the same as being 5 wide. You don't necessarily have to factor in ground loss as much around Churchill. Now, that's not true every day. You got to pay attention, and biases crop up, especially if there is rain, etc. But I'd be much more comfortable backing him on Churchill's track than on a track that played more towards the inside. So,
it's so interesting you say that because when you look at Churchill, it isn't a track that necessarily has that traditional crown of what they call where, a track's kind of like this and then it'll angle down ever so slightly into the inside. So therefore you get the dirt will tend to be a little bit tighter down on the inside. Whereas Churchill, it's a more narrow track and therefore it seems just that much more level. So that's, I think, why
maybe
you kind
why
of
that
get
is.
that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We actually have a question on the Churchill track in terms of the courses coming up. But okay, that's that. We will move on, shall we? Question number 9. Ross B has asked, I'm curious if by now there is a standout workout buzz horse and exactly what criteria is used to identify the true buzz horse. Right now, Disarm and Angel of Empire seem to be the top 2. Again, should we have a definition of buzz horse? Like, what does that even mean?
Talking horse would be the English equivalent. A horse
What, like talking horse from the track this week?
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's what...
historically, Barbaro, Rachel Alexandra, American Pharaoh,
Orb,
Animal
Mandaloon.
Kingdom, Mandaloon, they all had their
Kingdom was a
last
big one.
work leading up to the Derby was that was the best work of the week, and then they all ran to that.
So the big difference here, obviously, is over in England, we just this never happens. You don't get to see the horses before they get to Royal Ascot, before they get to our Derby, before they get to a Guineas. They're all just training at home behind closed doors, or sometimes in Newmarket, but it's not for public viewing. You wouldn't go and watch horses work. So you have no idea what's coming to the track. When I came out to the Breeders' Cup for the first time, it blew my mind that you can stand there and see these horses every day for 5 days leading up to their biggest day of the year. I mean, it is a privilege and an honor to be able to see that, but it gives you such a big insight. I was it gave me a whole nother level of perspective for what to expect on the race day. And so that's why we don't really have buzz horses, because you definitely don't get to go to like Aidan O'Brien's yard and see horses working well.
And plus, it would ruin being able to book them at a given price.
Right. And so
Well, yeah. There is that. Yeah.
usually, I mean, I put a lot into that, and I gotta say I haven't actually heard that, and I don't really try to watch them because I got 4 legs and a tail. It's like that's all I can really figure out.
JK once tried to be me in the paddock.
I did.
He had to fill in.
I
Okay,
did.
well, but Maggie, you're
It
then
wasn't
best.
pretty.
I
You're
would
best
ask
placed
Maggie.
then. So
Yeah.
you're best placed in your role to be able to tell us who is the buzz horse of the Kentucky Derby 2023.
Well, they mentioned Disarm's work was very, very good.
Okay.
And Confidence Game's work was tremendous. I mean, he was so fluid in his action because he's one that, don't forget, like going back to the Rebel, while he did pull away from that field, he was kind of lingering and laboring down on his inside lead. He didn't switch, and it could have been the fact that it was a sloppy racetrack, but he just was like, whoop, like that.
I just find this so fascinating because over in England, it's like when you're saying that they've worked really well, what do you actually want to see? Is it the numbers they're clocking? Because in my role with Sky Sports Racing over in England, sometimes I do get to go behind the scenes and see a final gallop ahead of a big race. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if they work too well or if they work up to the mark, everyone's like, oh no, they've worked too well. They've left the race at home. It's a disaster, all of that. Whereas over here, it feels like you do want to see something pretty sharp from
I think
them.
that's dirt racing.
Well, that's also the English perspective versus the American perspective, where you guys are like, oh no, like don't believe the hype. And we're like, yeah, bring the hype game, kind of like. So I think that's different mentalities. But
Maggie's married to one of you, so she can be judgy like this.
That's why I was like, oh my gosh, Pete, you actually translated the English to the American. You didn't need me. Well done. I think what defines a good work a lot of times is when you watch it and you're watching them go over the racetrack, and then you look down at the time, and if they look as though they're going easily, the rider's not moving, it looks as though they're almost going in slow motion, but you look down and you see 59 flat for 5 furlongs, then that's a very good work, and that's exactly what Confidence Game put in his final breeze.
Cool.
But with a horse like that, it's coming off of a layoff, you kind of want that. Where some of these other horses that just ran 4 weeks ago, you don't need to see that.
Yeah.
You want the horse that the big question mark is, why did he miss a proverbial final prep? And Connections have said that they want to play the long game. They want a 3-year-old that can compete throughout the year, and they don't want to be too hard on him. So I think that 59 for him was especially gratifying.
Okay, it's really interesting. And then I suppose the flip side of a horse that is a buzz horse that's done good work and everything you've explained is a horse where something hasn't gone to plan. And obviously verifying it was well documented, got rid of his rider in his final bit of
gallop.
Just so that's just the morning bit of exercise. But was that a bit of drama or not really? Do you see that often?
Of course, no. You
see
don't
that
see it often at all.
Actually, when I was out of the Breeze Cup, I never saw a loose horse.
No.
I was amazed I never saw a loose horse. But apparently that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen. And luckily, Greg Blasi, who leads the outriding team here, they do a great job, and they did catch him, after about 6 furlongs of running without his rider, and he wasn't running really fast. So they caught him and brought him back. Now the filly, what's her name? Peter Miller's. Yeah, Tommy Nolas.
And Tommy Nolas, I think.
She was flying off
she
the
got
race
loose as well.
track and
Missed that, right?
flew over the concrete, and I'm always like, ugh. Yeah,
Right.
so I would take her getting loose as a big negative, not necessarily with verifying.
Okay, interesting.
I have one more piggyback on this. It's just weird. Jonathan won't like this. It'll make his teeth itch. I predict.
Get ready to scratch your teeth.
Because it's one of these things. It like as I say it hardly makes sense. But it was a statistical study I saw, and you probably won't like this either because you're an actual evaluator of workouts. If you just look at horses that have a fast 5 furlong work in their between their last race and heading into this race, almost in any statistical query that you run, the horses who have just on a timed work, no other info other than 5 in a minute or lower, the horses with that fast on paperwork performed like significantly statistically better. It doesn't make sense because you don't know the circumstances under which that was earned, but I thought it was really interesting that you can even glean something just looking at the work tab without having your amazing amount of skill.
So a minute or less performed better.
Yes.
See, I love that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I just feel like it diminishes what you do.
Are you
No,
wincing?
I'm cool. Like I like to have statistical backup. No, right? Because you want that. You don't want them to be all out to
Right.
go, 59 and change. But yes, but when they do it like we saw, even two fills over what is believed to be a deeper racetrack at Hawthorne, his final work was 59 at Hawthorne, and he did it very easily too.
Before we go on to question number 10, and we only have 12 questions, so we're nearly at the end, I just want to showcase how much better being in America is than England, right? I do a load of preview nights over in England for like Cheltenham Festival, Aintree, Derby, whatever. And nobody ever just keeps topping me up with a gin and tonic.
Oh,
Whereas
speaking
here,
of which,
look at this. Yes. Yes. Come on, the Americans.
Samantha, can I get a vodka and tonic, actually?
This is
Yes!
This is my first one. Here's my second. The ice is still going. And then just as people are talking about horse racing, someone just brings over a third gin and tonic. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute. I am being paid to talk about horses racing on a track, and someone's giving me free gin and tonics. This is like some sort of heaven.
Hospitality.
This is
The
like
American
Southern
dream.
heaven.
The American
Southern
dream.
hospitality.
I love it. I love it. I'm not going home, guys. You've got me. Let's move on before I have a fourth gin and tonic and the questions don't come out. Gary H. has asked, I believe both the turf courses and dirt track have been revamped in the past 6+ months. Will these changes affect the running styles that we're familiar with at Churchill? I don't know what the changes are. Do you want to expand on that, JK?
I don't know what they changed the dirt course. I wouldn't worry too much about the dirt course. I will say that if you want to kind of play the bias game, it's a hard game to play as it's happening. It's a better game to play when you bet horses out of a track that you think is biased. But I will say this. If you're paying attention all day leading up to the big races, look for horses that you think are very good that end up on a certain part of the racetrack and see if they run well or bad. If you say you love a horse that ends up on the rail, that horse runs bad. Then see which other horses in the next race end up on the rail and see if they run bad. It doesn't matter if they're a 50-1 shot who gets on the rail and stops. It's when the best horse gets on the rail and stops. So keep an eye out for that. But with the weather, I don't think it'll be crazy. What I will say is that historically the turf course, when it rains, the rail gets bad. But it's a new turf course.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was the actual sod itself that was that issue or if it was the configuration.
Drainage.
And they might have changed the drainage, so that might not matter. So just keep an eye on that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, Maggie, you have touched upon that earlier, but they have made a change there, so it's...
Well, with the turf course.
Yeah, with the turf course.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, they improved the drainage. They obviously, there was a big debate of the entire debacle of the turf course last year.
A
Of
debacle. That's what it's branded as, is it?
Yeah,
It was.
they had a lot of trouble
Legend.
getting it rooted, right? I mean,
Okay.
Well, they played in Bermuda in the bluegrass state.
yeah.
I mean, okay.
I mean-
So it obviously took a long time to develop and take hold, and after many reworkings and obviously several months of not running on it, it's taken, and it seems like a much more fair and safe and even surface.
I know you're multi-talented, Maggie, but I didn't know that you had horticulturist among your many skills.
Pete, if I planted it, it'd be dead, and it'd never grow. So there's that.
Okay. Anything more? You probably can't add much more.
No, I mean, I mean, the turf course was bad, and from what I've heard, it like the horseman team, and Maggie probably can speak to this. The most important thing to me with something like a new turf course is what are the horsemen saying? And
Exactly.
last year they were saying we don't want to run on this, and now it seems like it seems like it's fair and it's working and it's good. That news about the drainage to me is very big because I might have gone in with a little bit of bias if it does rain Friday. I might have been looking a little bit like in the old days to have that turf rail, like JK said, be a little dead. We had a few derbies in a row where that was very much, derby days in a row where it did rain, and that was very much the case. But I'm just going to try to go in blank slate and just, use my powers of observation to hopefully what happens is we don't have to worry about a bias, and we can just bet the form. That's
the dream.
Hope.
That's
Yeah.
the dream. I mean,
It is.
so often over at home, Newmarket, you can get biases. There's all sorts going on, and ultimately, all you want to do is be able to go on the form, trust that the form is right, believe in that, and not worry about all the on-the-day biases. Let's move on to question 11. John C. has asked, I'm never sure whether to make action bets or prime bets when it comes to the Derby. There is a lot of luck and more unknowns than usual. Still, the various pools will offer value as a lot of lazy money will be wagered. How do JK, PTF and Maggie play it in terms of how much to bet? The professional handicappers these days tell us to play our strongest opinions. How strong an opinion can one have in a 20-horse field?
So,
Sorry.
I'll start this one. The first one is, I always tell people the amount of money you bet is the amount of money that you seriously do not care if you lose. So if you're a billionaire and you don't care if you lose $1 million, then bet $1 million.
Match or smack.
Right. It's not, his life's not going to change. Yeah. If you cringe at the idea of losing 50, then bet 25. And when it comes to prime bets versus action bets, I think what he's trying to ask is, it's Derby Day, so it's just kind of prime, right? It's a spectacle as a sport, but it's also a great wagering opportunity because there is a lot of casual fans that play, so there is opportunities. Don't get carried away with that. If you like a horse, play the horse. If you don't like the horse, pass the race. You don't have to play every race because it's Derby Day. The one race you do have to play is the Derby because it's the Derby. You got to do something. Bet $10, bet $2, doesn't matter. But what we try to do, and I speak for Pete, and is like, I just want to, look, there is days where I have picked one horse in the Derby and I've bet all my money around that horse, right? Bodemeister, and he ran second. American Pharoah, who won. Justify, who won. I didn't bet any other horses. This year is not one of those years. You have to let your opinions guide you into what you do. Don't put yourself in a box and say, it's the Derby. I got to pick one horse. I got to pick one horse. I have to pick one horse. No, you don't. There's a lot of different ways you can pick 6 horses. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to try to get alive to 6 horses in the pick 6 or the pick 5, and that's it. And if someone asks me in the Uber who I'm picking, I'll tell all of my Ubers a different horse.
That's like me with the Grand National. I keep referencing the Grand National, but it's literally because the only race over in England that is quite even at the same sort of hype level that you guys have here. But exactly the same. In the days leading up to the Grand National, my friends get in contact. People who definitely are not my friends get in contact. People who just want a winning tip. And I'm just like, do you know what? I'm just going to fire off a few names here. Hope for the best. One of them might land with someone good, and one of them might land with someone bad. Like, just keep hoping, right? I mean,
my question,
because he
know that again, that's their expertise as far as how to play things. But to kind of emphasize what you're saying, I mean, have you ever been in a podcast, TV, whatever? Have you given out a Derby winner?
Oh, yeah, I mean, nothing crazy. Like American Pharoah and Justify were easy work.
Orb.
I didn't give Orb.
The only good was Super Saver.
You were Super Saver? That was good.
Because it came up a wet track, and he was the only horse that's what it came down to.
But I think that's a good point. I haven't given a Derby winner outside of American Pharoah, and since I've been doing this stuff, which is since 2015. American Pharoah, Justify are the winners I've had. But I've hit, I think, 6 of the last 8 derbies.
Right.
Backup horses.
Yeah, backup horses and other horses. Like I didn't like Authentic, but I had Authentic. I definitely didn't have Rich Strike. I wouldn't if they ran the race again.
Can I tell a funny story about Rich Strike?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's
certain horses that when they win, you're watching it and you're thinking, no, that can't have happened. And then you watch the replay back and you think, no, that can't have happened. And it keeps bloody happening every time.
Yeah.
Every time you watch the replay.
Yeah.
A funny personal story. I'm gonna blow my husband up for a second here.
Go on, no one else is watching.
Right?
Yeah.
No one retell the story, Maggie. It's just between us in the room.
It's funny. So we had a horse named Glorious Empire.
If you don't know, Maggie's husband is a trainer, Tom Morley.
Sorry.
If you didn't know that.
Yeah. So we had a horse named Glorious Empire, and he was claimed from us for $62,000 by Matt Shera and Carlos Martin at the time. Anyway, he needed some extra care, and at Fair Hill, they have a hyperbaric chamber, and he relished this hyperbaric chamber. Anyway, long story short, year later, he's still at Fair Hill, and he ships up to Saratoga, and he wins the Grade 1 sword dancer. And Joe Sharp texts my husband like, ooh, you really messed up there losing that horse, didn't you?
No way.
Well, if anybody remembers, Joe
oh
Sharp
my
was the
goodness.
original trainer of Rich Strike and lost him for $30,000. And so as I'm sitting there with my husband, he's like, do I do it?
You got to.
We're very good friends with Joe.
You
so
got
he
to.
did just
You gotta
a bit
ask the
with him.
tease.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too
Yeah.
funny. Oh,
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I like that. What goes
Turnabout is
around
fair
comes
play.
around,
Right,
baby.
exactly.
We're all on
Especially
a
in this
carousel.
world.
Do you have anything else to? Oh,
Yeah, but I think the important part for this question,
This is a
sorry,
great
back to the
question, by the way.
Back to the
I think the
question.
important part about this question is, and this is what I try to tell people that, they ask me, how do I get better at this game, or what book should I read, and how do you what speed figures do you look at? All that stuff is like great and it matters, but it doesn't. The most important thing is to know what you know and know what you don't know, like what you like and don't like what you don't like. If you don't have an opinion, you don't have to have an opinion. Yeah. Like I don't, like in the Turf Classic, I have no idea who's gonna win that race.
Do you know what?
No clue.
I love that angle in of like, don't force yourself to have an opinion. I do over in England, I do a podcast every week that looks ahead to the big racing at the weekend. And over in the UK this weekend, we've got the 2,000 Guineas. First classic of the year. You'd kind of feel like you're obligated to give a winning tip. And I was on the podcast this morning, and a really good pro punter, but just general judge in Kevin Blake.
Oh, great.
I threw to him about the 2,000 Guineas, and I was like, come on, Kev, who wins it? What's your view? And he was like what JK just says there. He was just like, it's a really deep race. I don't know who wins it. Here's my angles in terms of how I'm going to play it. But, his point is JK's point. You don't have to have a view if you don't have a view. If you don't have a view, just accept it.
And you just have to find a way to try to leverage that opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so for me, my Kentucky Derby is all about Cody's Wish. I'm going to try to get alive in the pick six by singling him to the 6 horses that I think can win the Derby. And that's my day will be built around that. Because
if Cody's wishes be in a photo finish at the line, everyone
Don't.
get down on your hands and knees and pray for this man.
You
know I'm in trouble.
Just
You know I'm in trouble.
really pray.
Yeah.
I do want to just add one thing, though. I do think the opportunity is such on this day that I would like, I'm just going to say it like this, I'll lessen my criteria for what I need to have a bet because of all the extra money in. This is
true.
close to a unique opportunity in American racing. It's almost like you have a time machine, and you can go back to the days where you could go to Belmont and bet and know that every horse with Irish in the name was going to be half the price that it should have been, and that creates opportunities elsewhere. The Derby is like that. So, I mean, for me, I'm not saying you have to bet. You need an opinion to get involved, but I need less of an opinion to bet more in the Derby and on Derby Day because the opportunities are massive and singular, really, in our game. I think these big days are amazing days to play. Don't force it, but also don't be afraid to swing and set aside much more money for a day like the Derby, not just because it's the Derby, but because there's equity. There's what we say on the podcast all the time, meat on the bone.
Yep.
Love it. Okay, last question. Let's wrap this up. We've got a couple more questions, actually, because we've got a bonus question and then our final tips. But question 12 is from Anonymous, which is interesting, but it's directed straight at you, Maggie.
Oh,
so
lovely.
Ears pricked, please. It is not how to play a pick six, though, just so you know.
I
As someone interested in both Botanical and Two Fills, I'm curious whether Maggie thinks either will move forward or struggle with the dirt surface based on replays, workouts, etc.
Okay, so watching Botanical and, looking at her pedigree too. She has a dirt pedigree.
Dirt both sides, right?
Both sides.
Yeah.
And I wonder so Medaglia d'Oros, as much as I adore them, I've always liked Medaglia d'Oros, especially his fillies and mares. You think of the great Rachel Alexandra, for instance. They can be a little bit, sometimes, like 50% of them, just weak behind, and so you're searching for a surface in which they can push off of easier. So, i.e., turf, and the Tapeta with her. But watching her workout, she does move fine over the Churchill grounds, which a lot of times horses that prefer the turf will like Churchill because it's not like our New York tracks where, big sandy and it's deep and it's a little bit laboring. It's tight, the dirt surface here at Churchill. So they will get over it a bit better. And she's a total wild card because she has never run on the dirt, whereas Two Phils has. And I think, and I go back to the fact that I actually interviewed Larry Ravelli yesterday, and I asked him, I said, he was a failed OBS sales horse, which they work over the pro ride. And I'm like, doesn't it enhance the fact that he did run that big race at Turfway on the Tapeta, and that he may not naturally like it? And he told me, he's like, I honestly just think he didn't sell and work well because it was only an eighth of a mile and it takes him a while to get going. And furthermore, he's a later developing type, which hard spuns are. And I think the big performance on the Tapeta, I think, speaks of the fact that he's a horse that is developing later, that is finding his better strides, just with more racing. He's a really cool horse. I like the way he's trained over here at Churchill. Obviously, he worked well at Hawthorne prior to coming here. So I do have a lot of confidence into Phil's being able to translate that big race at Turfway.
That's such great info, Maggie. If he was just a synth monster, you would have figured that sale work would have been much better. And you make the great points about the breeding. And this might just be a horse that's getting ready to run a big effort. Another one of these live long shots for sure.
Just continues to grow and develop. And he has a really interesting personality. If people remember Tisnow, he would stand on the track for 20 minutes before he would actually go and train. And Two Phils kind of does the same thing.
Taking it all in.
Just speaks of a smart horse.
Love that. Okay, those are our 12 listener and viewer questions, but we have a bonus question. The bonus question is, what horse would you most like to own in this year's Kentucky Derby? Now, I don't know if I'm being fundamentally incredibly stupid here, but I want to own the horse that might win.
Yeah, so Forte for you.
Do you know what I mean? I'll take Forte, thanks. I mean, why would the answer not be Forte? I don't know. I like that we've got a bonus question, but I feel like I'm being stupid in reading it too simplistically. But I'd like to own Forte, and I don't think any of you guys are going to argue with that, are you?
Nope.
Well, financially, I would imagine he's got a pretty big stallion deal
Well,
already.
there is that. I'm thinking to the future. He's going to stand
He's already a 2-year-old champion.
Yeah. He's going to make me a load of cash, whether he wins or loses. It's job done for him. So I own Forte. I'm going to have a great day out at the Derby. I'm going to get pissed with my friends, and I might also win it. So yeah.
And I guarantee you that's what Mike Rapoli is approaching the Derby.
Love it.
I actually, though, I would want to own Verifying.
Interesting.
Yeah,
what's the case?
Because he's tactical. He's got a great pedigree, right? He's a half to Midnight Bisou,
right?
Who is a champ.
That's a great point.
Seeing Magner in the line, I'm assuming he's got a stallion deal at Coolmore already in the works.
Lovely.
And I just think that he's the type of horse that you could win the Met Mile with next year, if he trains on.
Okay,
you know what
so
I'm saying?
future thinking.
He's a horse that you can do a lot of fun stuff with. If maybe this 2-turn thing doesn't work for him,
totally think
which it clearly does.
He's a miler.
Yeah, but he could cut back. You could run him in a Grade 1 at Saratoga next summer. If you could run him in the Kings in the Allen Jerkins this summer. If that doesn't work, the Haskell. There's a million things you can do with Verifying.
You almost had a swear jar there with the King's Bishop Jerkins thing.
You can get away with it.
Do you know what I love about this? And this is why JK is so much more intelligent than myself. So I picked Forte, right? And I'm thinking backwards. I'm thinking about what he's done in the past and that he's a champion and that he's probably going to win. JK steps in and he's thinking about Verify in terms of what he's going to do in the future. And
you want my answer?
And what? Yeah, go on.
Angel of Empire.
Why?
I love me a state bred program.
Oh, wow.
Which obviously you don't have this in England. He's a PA bred. He costs $70,000. worst comes to worst, you got in some PA bred races.
Okay, so you're just like an insurance policy.
No,
You're
she's
just like,
no,
this is
He'd look
fine.
good in those.
She's a trainer's wife. She's thinking like a trainer's wife. Yeah.
Trainer's wife. What about you, Peter? Who would you like to own?
Knowing the bloodstock age, I mean, JK's verifying point is so cool, but he didn't have that 2-year-old grade 1 that they all salivate over. So I think the right answer is supposed to be Forte. But I mean, those are both
I'll let
great
you be
answers.
joint
though.
owner. I'll let you be joint owner.
Okay,
That's fine.
excellent. We'll see if we can get something going there. And then, I mean, I'm also just like fascinated by the ride that Derma Sotogake is going to hopefully be taking the owners on as well. I mean, I love the idea of these world traveling Japanese horses. I think that's one that I wouldn't mind a share or two of.
Okay. Finally, then, we're going to wrap up this panel with just our Oaks and Derby selections, please, essentially. So, ultimately, we've done all the chat, but we just really want to know who's going to pass the post in front. Peter, I'm going to start with you. Your Oaks and Derby selection, please.
Let's start with the Oaks. I'm a little bit boring here on the favorite with Wet Paint. I'm super impressed. I was liking maybe even a little more when we thought there might be some moisture in the track. Sounds like we may avoid that, which is very good from a fan experience perspective. I still think I've just been so impressed with the way she's been able to close in her races and the way she's just sort of shaped on the track without the benefit of particularly good setups. I think she's going to do the business. And I think it's an interesting betting opportunity to maybe try to work some horses at prices in underneath. I've been trying to make a case for the 14, Pretty Mischievous, to run in there as well. I think that the 2-runner, the Alice Look, who's been working well in the morning. I don't know if you got to see them together, but
yes.
they've been out there together in their works. And Alice Look, to my eye, hanging in there with Wet Paint, could go in the number. And because my daughter would get very mad at me if we went through a whole May 4th podcast without one Star Wars shout out, I truly believe Darth Vader could be a best of speed who hangs around for a little piece in the Oaks. So that's sort of I like Wet Paint. I'll mix in some prices. We'll see if we can get lucky.
And your Derby selection?
In the Derby, if you feet to the fire, pick one horse, I'm going to pick Derma Sotogake. I'm hoping double-digit odds stay in there. I think he's going to get the right kind of trip. I think this is the rare case where the horse that ran the fastest last race could be double-figure odds. So I have to lean there. But I mean, really, my co-A in the race is Forte for all the reasons we've been talking about. I think he is very, Derma Sotogake could, I obviously think he can win. There's also plenty of scenarios where he runs far back. He just doesn't.
So just to clarify, you've tipped up Wet Paint and Forte.
Well, Derma Sotogake is the official tip.
favorites.
It is true. I'm a little chalky in these open races. No, Derma Sotogake is the Derby tip for me. But Forte, in terms of wagering, I think you're nuts to do too much against him finishing somewhere in the frame.
Okay, fair. I'll step down from taking the fist. Maggie, over to you. Your Oaks selection. First past the post in the Oaks, first past the post in the Derby, please.
I will be giving completely different picks tomorrow on the Derby preview show on Fox Sports. No, I'm kidding. The Uber angle. Okay, so the Oaks.
God, I feel like this is like drum roll, please. Here she comes.
Okay, so I'm very much in between South Lawn and Pretty Mischievous.
Oh, interesting. That makes me feel good.
Which both of them. Obviously, 1-2 finishes in Fairground Oaks. We've seen the Fairgrounds filly races be very productive as of late in producing Oaks contenders and Oaks winners. So I've loved the way that both of them have been training, just their overall appearance. But I'm good friends with Brendan Wolf, so I'm just going to go with Pretty Mischievous.
Well, you can do head and heart. I like that. I often pair up with the head and heart. Because,
exactly.
Yeah, it's fine.
So I know often it's a little bit shied away from when you make equipment changes in these big races, but I really think she needs the blinkers. And he's just putting a little short cup cheater blinker on her. The post doesn't do her any favors, but again, I love the way she's coming into it.
The price will compensate, right?
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Pretty Mischievous, and then Derby selection.
So is going to be 2 fills.
All right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Love it.
And
Right.
you did say Derby there, Vanessa, so we are up
Yeah.
to
I did.
25 in the swear jar.
Just so you know, guys, so these guys have been taking the mickey out of me for the last couple of days because obviously I've come over to America and I'm calling the Derby the Derby because that's the
You
way
were
we
perfect
are.
tonight
Vanessa?
until then.
And
My husband's been here 12, 13 years, and he still says Derby.
this makes me feel a lot
I
better.
need the Derby.
It,
Like
I
trying to do
it
his
just
American
It just
accent.
feels so unnatural. But tonight it's kind of felt like okay, but that's probably because I'm on my 4th gin and tonic, so it's flowing off my tongue all right.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah. JK, let's have your Oaks and Derby selections, please.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I hate, and which will lead to my Kentucky Oaks pick. I hate when you're on an airplane and the you pull up to the thing and the seatbelt sign gets off, and then someone from behind you
Gets in front of you.
gets in front of you.
Aisle jacking.
I call it aisle jacking. I hate that more than anything.
That's
Pet
so
peeve.
weird. I'm
This-
okay with that. Like,
I
go through
hate
your
it.
life.
I hate it. The second thing I hate, that's first. Second thing I hate is closers and dirt races. Hate them. But I love wet paint. And I can't stop loving her despite what she is. And I say that because that's how much I like her, is that I hate closers and dirt races, and she's just that damn good. And I'm not saying that she can't get stopped. I'm not saying that she can't get stuck inside. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and I think I'll have backups on horses like the 11 Defining Purpose, the 14 Pretty Mischievous, the 4 South Lawn. I'll have backup tickets, but 90% of my money is going to go through wet paint.
Okay. And what about your Derby selection then?
I mean, I am going to. My goal is to get alive, and I'll pick one of these. But my goal
Give
is
us
to get
your
alive
6.
to Verifying, Tapit Trice, Angel of Empire, Forte, and Dermisota Gake. That's if I want to be alive to those horses. I think one of them will win. I'm
Brilliant.
gonna pick Tapit Trice. I don't love where he drew, but I think that his price is going to be good enough that if he can find a trip, I feel like I will have value on him at that point. Like I said, I'm going to pick Tapit Trice. I'm going to tell the bartender, Jeff Rubies, I'm going to pick Dermisota Gake. My Uber in the morning, I'm going to say Forte.
Love
but
it. Love it.
I'm going to pick Tapit Trice.
Someone will think you're a hero by the end of Saturday. And that's the key. That's the key.
As long as
guy-
it's formful.
If one person other than your mother thinks you're a hero, then that's all we can hope for in life, right?
Win.
Winning, yeah. Look, guys, I think that about wraps up this show. Before we say goodbye, I'm just throwing this as a curveball,
Please.
so you're all looking nervous, and rightly so.
We've had enough to
no,
drink.
No,
We're okay.
I'm a Brit, and I'm going to the Kentucky Derby for the very first time. Never mind about the horses, we've spoken about that. Give me one piece of advice. Peter Fornatali, you start. One piece of advice.
You're gonna have to drink a mint julep. Now I know you have a checkered history with whiskey, Vanessa. I've seen this. It's not great, but you're gonna have to have one gin and tonic before you shift over to the champagne or whatever posh drink you're gonna be consuming. One mint julep.
Mint julep. I don't even know what that is, but I will accept it. Maggie, one piece of advice for me. What is it? Just
F fashion and wear sneakers.
Wow,
love
she
that.
stole one of mine.
Love
Wow.
that. I'm lucky. I'm blessed. I'm quite tall, so I don't tend to wear a heel.
Exactly.
And so just go in my flats, accept it for what it is.
And like wear sneakers.
I love that. Okay. Okay.
Or trainers, as you would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yes.
And what
A lot
about you,
of walking.
JK? Give me a piece of advice.
I was going to give you 2 things. One is wear flats, or
Yep.
at least bring them in like a bag.
yeah,
Yeah.
love that.
That's just me.
The
from
wi-
having
the wise
to-
girl
Because
move.
when you've worn heels before, it's been so stressful.
No. My ears were bleeding from other people telling me about the shoes that they wore.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to help you out.
Yeah.
Transportation. Like, understand how you're getting there and how you're getting home, and make sure it's
Wow.
very, very close.
I've got it.
because I
I've got it
currently-
sorted, Vanessa. Don't
Thank
worry.
you.
I'm not gonna
Okay.
leave you like today.
This was like, oh man,
I know, I was
don't
just
have any
thinking,
of
I have
that.
absolutely
Yeah.
no
No,
idea
no,
how I'm
don't
getting
worry.
there. Guys, look, thank you so much. What a joy and a privilege it is to be able to just sit, talk about horse racing, talk about one of the best sporting events literally in the calendar. Peter, Maggie, JK, a complete joy. you want to hand over for the close?
Yeah, well, I wanted to do some quick thank yous. I want to thank everybody watching on the live stream. Really appreciate your support, especially like YouTube has been nuts. We've gotten so many new people into the In the Money universe, and we hope that you stick around. Everybody who turned up at the event, I mean, this is fantastic stuff, and we really appreciate the fact that we have a charitable element going on tonight too. I actually, on my Twitter, @LoomsBoldly, put up a link to the charity auction we have going on. Check that out. I really want to thank Lance George here from the Gall House for being an amazing host and a true hardcore racing fan who's just been an absolute joy to deal with. Vanessa, you for making the trip. JK for being the best partner ever. Maggie for being the best at what she does. Let's hear it for this panel. And that's basically it. We'll hit the we'll thank our founding partners. Why not? Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, another great charity, as well as 10 Strike Racing. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. I'm Peter Thomas Fornital. May you win all your Kentucky Derby photos.
Woo! Cheers.
Cheers, team.
Cheers. Well done, Pete.
Cheers.
And here comes King Russell zooming on the outside.